Coming up on this episode of Flirtations, we're joined by Jessica Maguire, a renowned expert in nervous system regulation and repair and author of the book, The Nervous System Reset, to have a conversation with us about not only healing the nervous system, but healing the connection with ourselves in the process. First, we explore what often gets overlooked in nervous system work and initial steps you can take to get off the roller coaster of emotions in dating. Jessica shares how we can regulate our nervous systems amidst the uncertainties of dating, even when someone pulls back or pushes your buttons. We get into how the anxious and avoidant nervous systems differ, the different protective responses we have when we're anxious, how the body stores emotions, and how neuroplasticity offers hope for repairing the nervous system. You can repattern your nervous system and indeed find calm amidst the storm. Finally, we'll learn how to feel safe in our bodies and sit with uncomfortable feelings, even if that's challenging or has felt impossible before. So, whether you're navigating the dating world or seeking a deeper understanding of you and your nervous system, this episode, it's for you. Let's do this, flirties. Time to meet Jessica.
I heard you wanted to flirt. I heard you wanted to flirt. I heard you wanted to flirt. Hello, my name is Benjamin. I'm the flirt coach and a gay Libra. Everyone has an inner flirt.
Hey, flirty.
Live, laugh, flirt.
Work the flirt.
Work the flirt. Delulu is the Salulu. Expert on the flirt.
Hey, flirty. There's always another flirt.
Everyone has an inner flirt. Get out of your head and into the flirt.
Flirties. On the show today, we welcome Jessica Maguire, a nervous system educator, founder of the Vagus Nerve Program and Nervous System Certification course, who has worked with over 20,000 students and practitioners on nervous system health and healing. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Benjamin. I've been really excited to chat with you.
I am equally as excited. I feel like I have so many things to ask you, so many questions, but also I'm like, I just want to feel my way through this conversation, and whatever comes up, whatever happens, we're going to go with it.
Love that.
So you are phoning in. We're recording this virtually. I'm on the East Coast and you're in Australia.
I'm on the East Coast of Australia. So yes, far away.
Amazing. Someplace I would always like to go on my bucket list. One day I will make it. I got to say, this is also a pinch me moment on Flirtations, where when I was really getting started, I feel like in my healing journey with my physical health, with my emotional and mental health, I just felt like there was something missing. There was something else I needed, some other type of skill or experience or training or teaching. And I found you. I took your Vagus Nerve program, and I am just, beyond excited to get to know you a little bit more today, chat with you. And for the flirties getting to know you for the first time today, how did you get started in nervous system health and education?
It goes back such a long time. And thank you for your beautiful words, by the way. That means a lot. And
you're so welcome.
It's so nice that a lot of students say that. It's like, there was a piece missing, because we go, brain or is it body? But it's, it's really both, and that communication, which is where I think there's this bridge of nervous system work, which is so beautiful to have both. So my story goes back a while ago. Actually, 20 years ago, I started with a Bachelor of Health Science, and I didn't realize it, but I was studying the vagus nerve through looking at heart rate patterns with electrocardiograph leads, and then I was looking at things with the gut, and then I went on to do a Masters of Physiotherapy.
Okay.
And loved that. Absolutely love physiotherapy. I was in private practice and I had my own clinic. Mm-hmm. I had lots of ups and downs along the way, but always passionate about going, how can I give people the tools to do this themselves?
Yes.
Whether that was physical pain, health, change. And then what I would see a lot was this pattern of people who had, quite a lot of physical pain and symptoms. So it could be gut disorders and insomnia and anxiety, but there was always this emotional component to it. And I didn't feel like I had the right framework to give my clients that were really stuck and probably had a history of chronic and traumatic stress or something in their childhood as well, you know, that made them more predisposed to these things.
Okay.
And so I decided I was going to close down my clinic and spend a year diving into the research.
Okay.
So had that in place, and then 3 weeks before I was ready to go, I was going to the US first of all, my beautiful older brother Sam died. And so it really dropped me into, like, it was such a shock and I was in disbelief for a long time, but it pushed me into nervous system dysregulation. So at the time where I was going to do all this study, I was swinging up to anxiety, down to shut down, into freeze. Never had that sort of response before. And it was really where I had to learn to embody these resources, not just as a clinician, but for my own healing as well. And so after a couple of years, that was in 2017, I came back to Australia and settled back into clinic working with my patients and started using things like vagus nerve stimulation, like through the skin, stimulating it. And then I was using a lot of these resources, and I put together a workshop. It was called the Vagus Nerve Workshop. And that went Australia-wide. And then my husband said, "You've got to take this online." And I was like, as if that will work, husband. What would you know? And needless to say, husband was right. And so we started with the masterclass, which, you know, has had thousands of students.
And that was thank you, husband, and thank you for you for doing it. That was the masterclass or the workshop that I took.
Oh, that's so great. So that's most people's starting point. And then we have like an 8-week program. And then last year we began our certification course for coaches, clinicians, teachers, people who do group work. And it's just been so deeply satisfying to not only see people can do this for themselves, but then also practitioners go on to have such a big impact in the lives of other people. So that's my story.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Thank you. Thank you for so much for sharing more about yourself. I'm curious because I had the experience I feel like a lot of students and practitioners coming through your training programs have, where we learn a lot about physical health, emotional health and regulation, even mental health. But what do you think is missing in some traditional modalities that your work really, it fills in the gap? It's just so comprehensive.
I think as a culture, we're pretty top-down dominant, meaning we think, well, if I change my mindset, I can do anything. And, you know, there is some truth in that. There is ways that we can look at things differently. We can look at our beliefs and our thoughts. But when we're really anxious, it's the body that is going to have the most impact on how we feel. And I think that this is what's been something that's been left out. So because my work is helping people feel better in their bodies, it became very natural to me to say, of course the body has more to do with how we feel. You know, that was what I did all day. But I think for a lot of us who look at healing, it becomes quite cognitive, and it feels like it's just not landing. You know, it's not really creating that change. And so one of the biggest pieces of this is what we call interoception, and that's our 8th sensory system. So I can nerd out a bit, can I? Is that all right, Benjamin?
Yes, please. I would love for you to.
Well, if we look at, like, you know, we've got our 5 outer-facing senses.
Yes.
And then our 6th sense we call proprioception. So that's the position of our joints in space. Okay. So if I'm going to step down off a curb, I know where my foot is without having to look. And then we can look at our 7th sensory system as the vestibular system. So it lets us know where the position of our head is in space. And it's a bit like, you know, if you're on an aeroplane and you might feel, whoa, we're moving this way, or feel a bit motion sick. That's all to do with the vestibular system. Okay. But our 8th sensory system, interoception, is actually to do with how we read and understand our internal bodily cues. And I think, when we have such a top-down society, we tend to have this ongoing rumination, as in I'm thinking this, is this how it is? But this says this, but if I look at it this way, but then it could be like this, or maybe they're doing it because of that. And so we have less trust in our own sense of self. And so with interoception, it's this overlap, right? Because it's signals like what's happening with our digestion that feeds back to the brain that doesn't actually enter our conscious awareness.
Okay.
But that still will change how we feel. So, for instance, if we've eaten something that's super high in sugar or super high in carbs and it feeds back to the brain, afterwards it's like, ooh, I'm feeling pretty, drop in energy levels. But we might not be aware of all those processes in the meantime happening.
Okay.
That's a really simple example. But if we look at bodily signals like butterflies in our tummy, a racing heart, they are the foundation for our emotions. So if we say, okay, it's two or more bodily signals that make up an emotion. So this can mean, all right, so that signal of a racing heart, well, it could be I'm excited, angry, I'm anxious. But it's not until we put another signal with that, like, well, I've got this tension in my shoulders and my tummy feels in knots. Oh, I'm anxious.
Yeah.
So then if we go from sensation to an emotion, we'll be mobilized to act from an emotion. That's what the whole point of it is, right?
Yeah.
And so then we're going to take some action. And that action, if we have a good understanding of our nervous system, can more often be in line with our deepest values. But if we don't have this awareness of bodily signals, emotions, particularly looking at, I'm moving into a different state of my nervous system, it's challenging for us to then take an action that really supports us or helps us be empowered.
Okay.
And I think that's what's missing for so many people. We get stuck in our head and we don't let the bodily sensations emerge. We don't know how to listen to them or be with them. And then we don't know how to take an action based off them.
Based on,
And then we get stuck. So I think that's what's missing for a lot of people.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I can definitely relate to that as well. As when I asked the Flirties for questions for the episode today, a lot of it was about dating anxiety, of course. No surprise there, but lots of questions too about overthinking, of limerence, obsession, infatuation. And we're going to stay here for a moment because I want to come back to the topic of nervous system dysregulation a little bit. I think if you're right, the Flirties listening, if they've done a little bit of nervous system work or they follow you, even they follow me, right? They're aware of nervous system health. We often hear about regulation versus dysregulation. And I think what you're speaking to when we're in a state of dysregulation and specifically making it about dating is our emotional reactions are perhaps incongruent or way kind of overblown, out of place related to the external stimuli that is kind of engaging with that emotional reaction. And so a lot of daters, and this has been true for me, a lot of guests on Flirtations as well, we operate from a state of reactivity when we're dating. Right? So someone doesn't text you back, or maybe you're on the apps and a conversation drops off, or you feel like you got ghosted, someone deleted their profile, and you're like, oh my gosh, can I find them online? What happened? Where's their social media? Why did they do this? We make these experiences so personal rather than being with that experience, because it can be really uncomfortable. We react, and then now we're not necessarily acting in alignment or accordance with ourselves, with who we are, with our values. You don't want to chase someone that's emotionally unavailable or who ghosted you, right? Or who can't even text back or plan a date, right? You don't want to be chasing and really sort of going all in on that, but oftentimes we do. Because in this state of dysregulation of heightened emotions, oftentimes anxiety and some other things, right? Some other thoughts that accompany that experience, we just want an answer, a solution, safety, right? We just want to feel, right, I can exhale, everything's good.
Yeah. I think, isn't dating like the best way to see your nervous system in action?
Woo, Jessica. Yeah. It's something. The Floridians listening are like, wow, I've been chronically stressed for years.
Yeah, it's so true. And I remember this because I met my now husband not long after my brother died. And it was a real, I'd say it was a relearning experience for me, but it was an important part of the healing process. But what's really interesting is the same neural networks for, safety, they're the same for attachment. Yeah. So if we are dysregulated, that's going to show up in our attachments for sure. So do you want me to give a little rundown of the states first and regulation and dysregulation?
Absolutely. That was going to be my very next question.
Well, if we look at the different states, and probably the easiest model is the window of tolerance, which was created by Daniel Siegel. We call it the window of regulation because I think there's an important difference between just tolerating what we feel or experience and actually being in regulation. And so when we're inside this window of regulation, it means that our nervous system is flexible, adaptable, our thoughts are coherent, our energy is fairly stable, even though we have ups and downs. And overall we're relatively stable. So, I'm talking to you now, Benjamin, and I'm really excited. So my energy's up because this is one of my favorite things to do. But I'm still inside the window. But if that energy kept going up, and I thought that this was threatening, I was like, oh, this is actually quite scary, I'd move into the sympathetic nervous system state. And what we look at that is we're too mobilized. So there's too much energy in our system. So we could feel anxious, we could feel angry, irritated, reactive. And I love this pattern to dating because attachment styles are kind of blanketed a lot. And I think I like to see the nuance in it. But if we look at we're mobilized, we're dating, what might that look like? Well, we might lean in and over text and, be going towards someone. And that makes sense because we feel threatened and we want to fix it. So you said it so beautifully before. We want that safety.
Absolutely.
Now, the thing that looking at there is, well, okay, I'm feeling mobilized where we might reach out towards the person or we might find ourselves checking our phone 50 times a day. Have they messaged me? And that's...
Have you observed my dating life?
Don't worry. This is me as well. But I think there's this part here where what we're really looking for is a sense of, okay, how can I take this fixation off them to get the safety to come back to me? And it's really interesting because what I spoke about with interoception is actually really important here. It's well, what are my signals telling me? And it's most likely that this is a threat. So it's okay, well, how can I get this sense of safety inside of myself? But the interesting part is also to look at how much of this is something else. Is this bringing up where my nervous system learned in the past that attachment wasn't safety? Because my parents didn't have that sense of solidity for me. And so there's a lot of ways that our nervous system has learned relational patterns that don't serve us anymore. But if we, in the moment, can create a feeling of safety in our nervous system, we can change that. That's amazing. Those networks are something we can rewire right throughout our life. So really important if we do that in the time. Now, The other state, let's say I start to feel a drop in my energy.
Okay.
I may move into more of a pattern in my nervous system where I feel collapsed, hopeless. Okay, let's say the guy or the girl that we really like has deleted their profile. We're like, what?
Okay. Yeah.
There's that, oh my God, it's never going to work out for me.
Yes.
I'm always going to be alone. Everyone else has a partner and it's just not going to work for me. And I can say this because that's where I was too, stage earlier.
Speaking from personal experience.
I know what it was like. And so that story and those feelings bring a lack of energy. So it's like an immobilization response where we feel ourselves just like, oh.
Okay.
So if we look at what happens there, people tend to isolate.
Yeah.
They withdraw, stonewall.
Yeah.
And that, that can be what we might say is more of an avoidant pattern if we were going to look at that with attachment styles. So that can be interesting. But if we look at freeze, the pattern of freeze or the nervous system state of freeze is a blend where we have a bit of both of the mobilization and immobilization, which matches more to a bit of a disorganized pattern where people sort of, they lean in, they really want this relationship and then it's too close and they're like, no.
Yeah.
So there's like a push-pull. Yeah. So that's an interesting pattern if we recognise that's more likely to be if we've had a history of trauma.
Right. Okay. That's amazing and really helpful, really talking about nervous system health in terms of regulation versus dysregulation and tying that to attachment styles and attachment theory too. That's a new connection I'm making today when you're, if you're more lean and more avoidant, your nervous system may be in that state of collapse. You said like almost withdrawal versus anxious is the other end of the spectrum that we were talking about just a moment ago.
It's really interesting, right? Because we say that avoidants don't care. But if we think of it the other way from a nervous system point of view, they probably care the most. And they did show some good research on this with kids who, it looked like they were ambivalent, didn't really care about the attachment figure coming back in the room.
Right.
But in terms of their stress markers, they were stressed. They were on the inside. That was the case. So I think it's always good for us to ask what another person's experience is rather than just label as, they're avoidant because, we don't really know how it is on the inside.
Right. Right. And I think you're speaking to the experience I know I've had and a lot of the flirties have too, that it's really complex. One thing I was picking up is the nervous system. It's almost like it's very malleable, right? It can change based on your relationships, on your childhood, your family dynamics. And so if you feel like you've been maybe imprinted with a nervous system that doesn't really lend itself to making healthy, sustainable, connective relationships, you can heal that. You can change that.
Yeah, it's so inspiring to know this. And I think, we can look at it where if we've had situations in our past. Okay, let's take somebody who identifies as an empath and says, I'm really sensitive to other people's moods and emotions and things.
Absolutely.
We might say, well, maybe for an empath, what happened when they were a child was they had to be a little bit more on edge of what's somebody else's mood like because that's going to dictate the environment.
Yeah.
And so there's a little bit less of that interoception connecting to our inner world and a little bit more connected to our outer world. And so sometimes we might find, I've forgotten my own needs. I haven't, taken care of me. I've been so focused on the outside.
Absolutely.
And that's really great information, but it's also so important to say, this was my nervous system's beautiful way of keeping me safe, of protecting me.
Yes.
So it's learning. It's trying to be protective, and that may have served us well as a child. But as we get older, and I remember having this conversation with my husband. We were out, and he's like, why does everyone come up and tell you all their problems? And I was like, I'm so caring. And he's like, So it was really interesting to recognize that I played the fixer, rescuer, helper role. And I thought that's what I had to do.
Right.
But it's interesting, you know, a lot of the work I do with health professionals now is looking at the difference between compassion and empathy. So we see in the science that with empathy, it often leads to empathetic distress and burnout. And that's a different activation in the brain and the body as opposed to compassion, which is actually quite nurturing for our nervous system and will light up the same networks as love, as where empathy will light up. If we're watching somebody else distressed, our own pain networks light up and it perpetuates dysregulation. So there's lots of interesting stuff there around, well, if I want to help other people, you know, if I'm a clinician, if I teach classes, and I can only really do that if I can be a co-regulator from my own place of staying regulated.
Right.
And so it's just a different dynamic of how we understand our protective responses that show up relationally. And so, as I said, for me, it was certainly rescuing. And, you know, that's okay. But the thing that was then important was to relearn that. And that was in the moment to know somebody else can be having a painful experience and I can sit in my own regulation and care for them, but I don't need to get distressed alongside them.
Right.
And that's okay. But through neuroplasticity, that changed for me. So it was really interesting. And that, you know, that secured relationship that I had with my husband at first felt so strange. I was like, is this boring?
Yeah, that's I hear that from the flirties sometimes too, as they're kind of relearning to regulate their nervous system in a different way. They'll often describe, like wait a second, what's happening here? Where's the chaos?
It feels so strange,
right?
So that's really something to, you know, I think it's where the right listening to our inner voice is important, but also the right people around us. And I was actually in therapy at the time because after losing my brother, I'd spent, you know, a good year in therapy. And my therapist at the time said, "You're scared. There's nothing wrong with this," you know. But she was the only one that was really honest with me. And I really appreciate that because I think there's a thing with nervous system work we say where story follows state. Yeah. So if we look at our story, which can include there's something wrong with that person, we need to know what state that's coming from first. So I was in flight energy. I was mobilized. I was scared. I was anxious about getting too close to somebody in case I lost someone again. And so my nervous system was creating a story so I'd get out of there. And you know, it can be it's a different story for every state.
Right. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Like, and, you know, I think the flirties, a lot of them have heard of fright, flight, freeze, and fawn responses in relation to the nervous system and the state and the story. I love that we're talking about this and just how interconnected, right, thoughts, feelings, emotions are with the nervous system. And this is why it can be so difficult, but very, very possible if you are in a state of chronic dysregulation, of stress. Like if you're dating, that's what we focus on a lot here in flirtations. But if you're stressed, right, with maybe your family relationships or friendships or with your career, education, it's like dating doesn't exist in a vacuum. If we're dating, it doesn't exist in isolation. We're bringing all of these states, all of these experiences and stories into the dating process as well, which can, you know, make it more complex. But as we're going to get here in the conversation focused on healing and how to just kind of relearn different ways to regulate our nervous systems, like mine for the longest time, and I didn't realize I was in this state, was freeze. I was just in, like, I felt emotions and experiences so intensely that how my nervous system kept me safe. And I have to thank my nervous system, right, and my body for ultimately keeping me safe, keeping me alive, was just to shut down and to isolate and to withdraw, right? Because if I didn't have to face, right, the world, then maybe I would be okay. And so along with that, I developed a lot of depression as well. And I think there's this very, very interesting experience we can have with anxiety, where the anxious person, right, if they're in more of a freeze state, may seem very exhausted and kind of listless, but inside it's like they're going a mile a minute, right? It's like inside they're still feel very like, agitated and restless and uncomfortable. But over time, like I've been able to learn different ways of bringing some safety, some stillness, being okay with the full range of experiences. And now like it's really one of the only ways I'm able to do this, to do flirtations and be the flirt coach and do coaching and create content. It's not as if I don't experience rejection and anxiety and nerves and disappointment and sadness. I experience all of it. I'm human. But I'm able to come back to me, act in really alignment with my values, my hopes, my dreams, my passions, my interests, how I want to show up in the world, and run towards what I want versus running away from it, which is what I did for so long, because that's where I was at, and that's what I needed to do. It's the way I kept myself safe and kept myself alive.
What do you think was the biggest turning point for you from like, you know, freeze, being chronically there, to, okay, yes, there's challenges, there's these feelings, there's these emotions, you know, to coming out of that?
I think it's a lot of what you talk about. And it's like I kept trying to, for the longest time, look for the quick fix, right? Or the magic solution, that overnight pill, and focus on one thing. Okay, I'm feeling anxious, so let me just breathe. Or I'm feeling anxious, let me go for a walk. But I had to recognize what was maybe going on with my gut health, what was going on with my lifestyle habits, where I was scrolling on my phone, you know, hours before bed, right? And so like what I was consuming, what I was putting in my body, with food, water, media, everything. And just over time, little bit by little bit, just starting to develop some better habits, which allowed me to develop a stronger relationship with myself, trust myself that I could do what was best for me, be consistent with those choices. And little bit by little bit, the mind started to calm down, in the sense that I became more resilient. And that's what was true for my nervous system too. So now, like a lot of the flirties have the experience dating, it's like they have that emotional reaction to another person, and it's disproportionate to what the reaction should be. Right? If someone doesn't text you back, that should not be why you can't eat, why you can't sleep, why you can't think or focus, why you are just scrolling on your phone, why you distance yourself from your friends or family, or why that's the only thing you can talk about. And your friends are like, oh my God, right? Can we talk about, here we go again. Like being able to overall regulate my nervous system so I can come back to that place of homeostasis, that place of equanimity we say in yoga, so that I can then move forward with, okay, what do I need? What do I want? What do I desire? I can just be a little bit more focused and intentional with the decisions I make and how I live my life. But it's been, oh my gosh, a process, and it did not happen overnight. I still have bad days. I still have sleepless nights at times, right? I'm not perfect by any means, but the only way I'm able to show up and do this work and interview you on Flirtations is because I'm able to regulate myself and be like, okay, Benjamin, like, yeah, you're feeling a little anxious, but also you're good. You're good. There's no danger. You're good.
Good. I so love hearing that. I think there's like a misconception that it is one thing. If we want to talk about this from neuroplasticity, we really need a good 8 weeks minimum to create a change. But, in saying that, then we also have life that happens where events can spiral us, and, we might have a hard time where something's going on, like we need to move house, and totally get what that time is. And I think after my brother died, it took me a year to get to okay, I feel semi-safe, but then you'd still have moments where you would totally go up and down and up and down, and that's I think part of being human. But I think what you've said that's really important is when people still respond today to something from the past, we're really not free. And I think it doesn't matter if we actually get triggered. It's more that we say, whoa, hang on a minute.
Right.
What is going on here?
Yeah.
And do I react now or not? Because imagine how many relationships we prevent from getting off the ground because of that reaction that this is going to be just like that time that somebody before. So what would happen for me was the mistrust that I had, because I was still in disbelief that Sam was gone, my brother, was that I had a mistrust for so many things, and dating especially. And so what that meant was I couldn't trust myself. And I think this is what happens with traumatic stress. We feel like we can't trust ourselves, trust the world, trust other people.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of people, the antidote to this anxiety is trust. And that means, how can I build more trust with other people in my life, in myself? And maybe that's away from the dating scene. It doesn't mean we stop dating, but it's like other things that bring that trust for us. Yeah. And so I would say after that experience, that would be my greatest gift, is knowing I can trust my inner voice.
Yeah.
And it guides me through, what I want to do with my work, exactly like you were saying, but also I would say I'm a bit cluier around when I'm like, this doesn't quite feel right now. So there's all those things that it brings wisdom as well, doesn't it, as we have that healing, which is really amazing.
And we're going to come, I think in a few moments, concluding the conversation, talking about intuition, self-trust, setting up the flirties with some tools and strategies there, because I've been saying for a while, I just believe this so strongly. Your intuition is this, it is like the ninja of your dating toolbox. It is your secret weapon in your dating toolbox. Not that you're going to always be able to be free of those moments of anxiety or sadness, disappointment, rejection, all that good stuff. But you're going to be able to come back to this space of whew, right? I'm good. And so you can go on about your life so that your life doesn't stop, or you go into a freeze state, or you put all these things on hold just because something maybe, not so great happened in dating, or they didn't text you back, or you had an awkward conversation and you're like, oh my God, what are they thinking? I'm not going to see them till our next date now. But you were just talking about, and I got some questions here about stored emotions. And because I think this is such an important part of the conversation, where sometimes when we're dating, we experience, it's like that triggering moment, or we feel, this upwelling of emotion, and you're like, oh my gosh, where is all of this coming from?
Yes.
Could you share a little bit about how the body stores emotions?
Yeah, it's really amazing. Let's say you can remember when you rode your push bike by yourself with no training wheels on, and you might have a picture that comes into your mind. You can see, there's my bike, there's my parent, there's my brother or sister. You've got this picture, or it could be your favorite holiday, whatever it is.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we call that our explicit memory. And so through what we learn cognitively, we have our way of remembering information, and that part of our brain that's storing that is also the part where we have thoughts narratives, language. Really important. We'll call that our thinking brain, like the outer part.
Okay.
But further down in our survival brain, the fact that you can get on a bike today and ride it without having to think about it, your body just knows what to do. It's a bit the same.
Yeah.
And so our nervous system learns implicitly. It doesn't require this conscious input. And so from a memory point of view, if you also think about a time when you might have gone out and had a few too many drinks and you can't quite remember what happened,
right?
That's because an important part in the brain is influenced by the alcohol called the hippocampus, and it has to do with memories. Now, when we have events that are highly stressful, sometimes the hippocampus goes offline. And we can't quite remember the whole details of an event. You know, I can't remember the whole experience of my daughter's birth because it was so, so big that I can only see pictures of it. You know, it's like snapshots. And so that's with certain experiences that are so emotional, and it's adrenaline that turns it off. So when we have experiences that are really traumatic, we store pictures, and the things that felt the most emotional get registered in our survival brain. And when the survival brain has an experience that feels similar, not the same, but similar, it says, I'm going to activate the same pattern in your body. So it goes from, we talk about the brain as being a prediction machine. Well, this the really nerdy term for this in science is called prediction coding. And so we basically our brain operates this way because it saves us energy. You know, if you had to think every time about tying your shoelace, the energy to do that would be too high. So a lot of these things happen on autopilot, and that's our nervous system responses. So whether we're aware of it or not, our survival brain is taking in every experience we have to create this internal model so that when we encounter something similar, it will respond the same. So let's say what I was talking about when I lost Sam, my new updated way of seeing the world, not consciously, but through my survival brain, was that things could fall apart at any time again. Mistrust. You need to be on the lookout because last time you weren't, and then look what happened. So I would feel experiences that felt like, oh, this is a bit, I could lose something here. And so my body would have, I would feel a strong sense of fear, wanting to be away. And then the story would come with that of I can't trust anyone. So what you've spoken about so beautifully is that unless we have the tools to say, what state am I moving into? Like, what's really going on here? From a body perspective. And then say, this is sympathetic. Here's the story. We don't have to get rid of it. We just say, that's what's really happening here. And then, there is a part where we can say, is this today or is this because of what happened before, or is it both? And then once we come back to regulation, it's like putting on a new pair of sunglasses and going, all right, what do things actually look like now? And it might be that somebody was being a dick for sure, and they need to be talked to. But it might not be the doom that our survival brain has predicted.
Do I need to, set up a boundary, say something, advocate for myself? Something along those lines. But this is so wonderful because my next question, I got a lot of questions from the Flirties about overthinking. And I think you just explained why we overthink and overanalyze so often. This is one of by far the biggest questions I get with regard to dating is, about dating anxiety and managing dating anxiety, but specifically about the overthinking piece where I cannot stop my brain. And it's
really challenging. But I think it's not until we get to that nervous system level of like, okay, thinking, stop. Let's just come down. What's here? And it might be, my shoulders are up, my jaw's tight, my heart's going fast. All right, well, can I just bring that to settle a bit first. Like get yourself out of the thoughts, come to the body for a minute and really sit with what's there. And sometimes it's like a tuning inward to there's parts here I don't want to feel.
Right.
And it's like, okay, I'll let myself feel for a minute.
Yeah.
And then the messages come. So we can talk about this in a nutshell as the 4 E's.
Okay.
The first E, we've got to let it emerge. We've got to let what's happening come.
Oh,
that's where we stop. We're like, no.
No, Jessica, I'm not, we're going to stop there.
I don't want to feel this. No. But we don't want to feel it. So we don't let it emerge. And then the next one is experience. Now, experience means that we actually go, oh, there's the anxiety. It's not really about them for a minute. It could be, but let's just come back here.
Yeah.
So we actually sit in that anxiety. That's the interoception piece where we tune into the sensations, the messages, the emotions. And it's uncomfortable, we don't want to do that. That's human nature.
Yeah.
The next E is really about express. So you said it before, it's not necessarily about I just need to go for a walk or I need to do some breathing exercises.
Right.
Sometimes it's actually about like, what is this deeper part of me really need? And if I passed a microphone over to it, what would it say? And, that was what I uncovered when I did round after round of these 4E processes after my brother died was like, I don't trust myself anymore. And to learn that was like a light bulb. Was like, whoa, okay, that's really profound. Okay, how do we get more trust? Yeah. And then the final E is one, I say this with a grain of salt, it's to expel, but it's not like some cathartic release to get rid of. It's more that we feel that discharge of stress mobilization, which might show up like a whoa.
Yeah.
And a settling, the body has a sense of relief, the thoughts settle down, we feel that deep breath or a yawn or a sigh. And so those 4 E's, if we don't let that happen, we typically stay in rumination.
And rumination and overthinking. Wow, that is really helpful. The 4E model, I think, takes us perfectly into, this has been so wonderful. It's gone by so quickly. I want to set the flirties up now with some healing strategies. I think we've been talking about that throughout the conversation, but some ways to build that self-trust with themselves. First here, talking about, because I got a few questions here. What if we don't allow ourselves to emerge, right? We can't even be with that first E. I hear from the flirties, I feel sometimes maybe very uncomfortable in my own body. Yeah. Right. I don't feel safe within myself. So how could we maybe start to build some safety, some self-trust with our nervous system by just allowing ourselves to feel when that feels maybe really uncomfortable?
Yeah, it's such a good question too, because it isn't about always just diving headfirst into what we feel. This is where we would say we work with our sensory systems earlier on. So like, I talked about the 5 outer-facing senses.
Yes. Touch,
taste, sound and smell. So we can really look at like the outside part of the body. So if I was to connect and add some, there's my wrist, my wrist, particularly like for freeze and shutdown. If I'm doing this, I've got bilateral stimulation. So I'm squeezing one wrist, squeezing the other wrist. I can do the same on the elbows. I can do the same up into the shoulders. So we don't go into like this feeling yet. We just go, okay, there's my body. I'm here. And then that can often be enough just to get us to feel like an organized sense to the brain of where the body is that's not overwhelming.
Okay.
And it also gives the brain something to focus on that's not, there's a fear and I've got to figure it out. It's like, okay, there's a fear, but can you pay attention to this? Because rumination is like, I'm trying to figure it out, right? It's a strategy. Yeah. So that's a really good place to start. And then once the settling comes, we could look at the 4 E's. But if that doesn't feel safe enough, it's really about finding a person, an animal that can be a co-regulator with you.
Yeah.
or nature. Like for a lot of people, the environment they move into can change that pretty quickly.
Yep.
So, you know, that might mean, all right, I need to get to the beach, or I need to get to a forest, or a place where it's like, this is a place I feel a deep sense of trust. And also, like, if there's a person, and a lot of people who've relationally felt, you know, like there's been relational trauma, animals are a great place to start if another person that is just not where they're at yet.
That's really helpful, is look outside of yourself to co-regulation. That is so great. That's why, right, petting my cat, or you have a dog, getting out in nature. People say, right, being near the water, in the forest with the trees, even a desert, right, whatever your favorite landscape is, it could be multiple, different scenes of nature, why that's so regulating for us. And then I love what you were doing, just gently squeezing your wrist. Like, I think some of the flirties have heard, and I've played around with this, of self-massage, of even like maybe tapping, or come to a yoga class. So like creating, like, I feel like when we are just so in our head, we got to bring some groundedness to the experience. And so, right, maybe more than just like putting your bare feet on the ground or the earth, but like actually creating some physical senses to bring all of your senses back into the real world.
Yeah, it's so true. You know, like,
so important.
I went to a pain conference on last weekend, and it was like the world's leading pain researchers. And the whole thing was about, like, for people who have ongoing physical pain. But, you know, it doesn't get better. It's about having a new sensory experience. And it's the same for our nervous system. A lot of this work will be like, what's that doing? But it's a new sensory experience that creates neuroplasticity.
Wow. That is so fascinating. I'm going to squeeze in just one more question before we conclude. And that is just any final words or thoughts you have for the flirties about self-trust, nervous system healing, or maybe something that's coming to mind we didn't talk about today.
I think the biggest piece is what we might think of as a U-turn. So it's a little bit like, if we are so fixated out there on someone, think of it as like, okay, if I can make the U-turn back to me, what is really the need? Like, what is the part of me that needs me to take care of it right now? You know? And that U-turn, I think, again and again and again and again can change, like, be a really integral part in changing the way we attach with people. Yeah.
I love that. Coming back to you, like, if you believe in energy, a little woo-woo, calling your power back to you. Oftentimes, if you need to have a boundary, right? Say something, ask a question, seek clarity. Like, of course, like, clear communication and just communication in general is going to be fantastic in dating. I don't think you're going to be able to date or have relationships without good communication. But if you are in that state of dysregulation, of anxiety, of overthinking, of rumination, I think we've talked a lot about nervous system health, healing, regulation today, how to get out of overthinking, create that self-trust with you, with your body and with your own experiences, and maybe start to write a new story, right? Bring some new experiences to your nervous system. That's one of the, I think, big takeaways for me. And what I've learned from you is, just because you may be in a state of chronic stress, of dysregulation now, the nervous system is adaptable, it's malleable, and you can get to a place of centeredness, of calm, where it's like you know, if you're in the ocean and there's lots of waves, you're there. You're not getting whipped around and tossed about and just going all over the place. You're like, oh, I can actually withstand these waves. I'm good.
Exactly. Yes, you couldn't. That's such a beautiful way of putting it.
This has been amazing. Jessica Maguire, thank you so much for being on Flirtations today. Only other order of business is where the flirties can find you, where you live on the internet, and roll in some of your programs. And work with you.
So it's all my name, just jessicamaguire.com.
Okay.
And we have our upcoming Vegas Nerve program starting in June. And we'll have another one of our practitioner courses in September.
Okay.
But we also have some live events coming up soon in the US, but more to come on that.
More to come. All right. I am putting those on my radar as soon as I find out. Thank you. This is a true dream. Thank you so much for being on Flirtations today.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, Flirties, that's a wrap on this episode of Flirtations. Thank you so much to our guest, Jessica Maguire, for coming on the program today to talk about nervous system repair, regulation, repatterning, and just healing, right? Our bodies, mind, body, and soul, the connections we have with ourselves so we can have stronger, more empowered, resilient connections when we're out there flirting, dating, forming relationships, making friends. Yeah, all the things. A true dream collaboration for me here at Flirt Headquarters. I was ecstatic to record this, although a wee bit nervous, and I'm very happy, yes, with this episode. So thank you so much, Jessica, for your time today, and thank you to you, the Flirties. Oh, and follow Jessica, y'all. All the links there for you. The Vagus Nerve program, right? The masterclass, it's there. Her socials, the book. I mean, if you're looking for some nervous system work from a true bona fide expert, look no further. Problem solved. Thank you, Flirties, for tuning in, for listening, for streaming, wherever you may be in the world. None of this is possible without you. It's for you. This is all for you. So I hope you got what you needed. As I say in yoga sometimes, take what you need and leave the rest. You can come back to this episode or any episode of Flirtations at any time. They'll always be here for you. Yes, thank you for being here. Please rate, review, subscribe to the show. I always save that for the very end. If you're still here, rate, review, subscribe to the show, and share this episode or another episode of Flirtations with a friend, someone you want to share some BFE, big flirt energy with. I'd love you for it and greatly appreciate you. Okay, signing off officially here at Flirt Headquarters. My name is Benjamin. I'm the Flirt Coach and Gay Libra Flirty. Happy flirting.